So we're going to welcome our next four speakers. I'm going to introduce them first, and then we're going to get each to come up in turn. So we have David from Decision Labs, Seb from One Spatial, Kurt from Fujitsu, and Christopher from Advanced Infrastructure will be presenting in our next segment. So for those of you who've joined us online and in the room for the first time, what we're doing now is Gemini Call Live. Gemini Call Live is a take on the Gemini Call, which has been happening for about the last 4 years, every Tuesday from 10:30 to 11, hosted by the Digital Twin Hub. Now, the purpose of the Gemini Call is to bring together the community to get and share knowledge and insights between members of the community. And it encourages anyone partaking in the call to ask questions to the speakers as they give their presentations, and then we'll give an opportunity for the speakers to answer those questions at the end of the segment. We've transposed that, which is an online thing typically, into being in person today for the maybe 50 to 100 of you in the room and for the hundreds or so of people joining us online today. And we're going to go through our next four speakers in the same way we just finished our last four. So on that, I'm going to ask David to come up, please, first from Decision Labs. If you could come, give your presentation, avoid sales pitches and acronyms, and then we'll pitch questions to you afterwards. Over to you, please, David.
I'm renowned for not sticking to the time, so I even brought my own timer, but I see that they've already started there, so I better go with that official one. So I'm founder and chief exec of Decision Lab. Our take on digital twin is from the decision intelligence perspective, and I'll go into that in a little bit more detail in a second. We embrace hybrid working, so we've been doing hybrid before COVID took us all down that path, and we're a set of disparate and excited individuals who care passionately about how organisations can achieve a better outcome. And so with that, we have a specific mantra, and you'll get a feeling from the mantra about what we're all about. So if you look at how we view what we do on a daily basis, is that the success of an organisation is nothing but the sum of all the decisions. Okay, so that puts the focus on how we come at digital twin and where we fit into the world. Decision intelligence is relatively new for us, actually. This is our fourth pivot, our fifth pivot in total. We started in 2007, where I was an ex-academic, just fresh out of university, and I was building simulation systems for decision support, kind of the precursor to digital twins as we would know them now. In 2012, we discovered that it's great to be able to simulate systems, so the precursors to digital twins, essentially. But what organisations really want is the power to make some decisions, the power to make a recommendation to understand what's going on. So at that point, we expanded out into old-school mathematical optimization, mathematical modelling, and we used digital twin thinking, simulation thinking, combined with optimization in order to make better decisions for organisations. That journey lasted 3 years. And at that point, data science was beginning to emerge as a concept, and we started to look at data science and think how we could incorporate that within our company strategy. And we first launched a machine learning team in 2015, and that became part of what we were trying to achieve. So how can machine learning be built into the concepts of digital twin, optimization, and simulation in order to help organizations make a better decision? Now, to be fair, we did that quite early on in the maturity of data science, particularly for manufacturing decisions or organizational decisions. And what we found during that phase was it was actually really hard to get real-world use cases, organizations basing live business decisions on machine learning-based models. So at that point, there was a slight pivot in our strategy. And what we became then was an R&D-led technology company, because what we wanted to focus on then was understanding how machine learning can be brought into the decision-making space, how it can be part of a robust decision-making strategy, what are the blockers to doing that now, and how we can overcome them, and what technology changes will enable that. And so we developed capabilities in things like reinforcement learning, which focuses on how decisions and how organizations can learn how machine learning can be used in order to help those decisions in a more kind of robust and understandable way. And that has led us back pretty much to the start of the journey. So what we see now is that the market is way more mature, way more case studies on this, a lot more examples of how this is done well. That's brought us back to getting into the place where we're able to make supported decisions with decision intelligence on top of digital twin thinking. What this looks like as a company, and no sales pictures, I understand. So we've got an enabling toolkits team. Yeah, they're out there helping organizations who are quite mature in this space already. Yeah, organizations who want to build their own digital twins or want to build their own models, we're there to support them through that. We're keeping very close to our R&D theme. Yep, so we have a technology and innovation team, and they're researching and exploring the space that will allow organizations to make better decisions. Within that, you'll see, if you can read the slides, that there's some stuff around human autonomy teaming. And that's a big part of our current journey. We believe that the power to execute an organizational outcome has got to be through the kind of collaboration of humans and AI working together. And there's a lot of stuff that's emerging in this research field currently, and that's where we're focusing our efforts. We've then got the industrial solutions team. Now, they're out there building solutions for individual companies, for organizations that are enabling better decisions on a day-by-day basis. And then we've got our platform team. So the platform sits above current systems and methodologies and softwares within an organization, uses a digital twin in order to enable the decision-making at an organizational level, so to optimize the decisions at an organizational level. Okay. As part of this, as I've mentioned before, we do think it's all about the humans. Yeah? The human element of this is really important, the human element in human AI teaming, and how we go from just giving a recommendation for a solution, and how that explainability is achieved, and how people can understand the consequences. And that's where, like a digital twin, plays particularly into the strengths of what we do as an organization. Just as a very quick case study, I don't think we've got time to watch this entire video, unfortunately, but our latest piece of work is in manufacturing. So here we have a pretty modern paper conversion facility that turns out cardboard boxes. Goes from paper coming in to the end of the manufacturing process is custom boxes that are pre-printed, folded, ready to go out for use across a wide variety of organizations. I think Amazon is their biggest customer. The process you will see is very automated. Yeah? This is not a backwards company. They've got ERPs covering what they do. They've got digital twin thinking across the entire organization. But they still recognize the need for digital intelligence in order to achieve the outcome. So what they've got in terms of digital twin and ERP and adoption of technology hasn't been the solution to what they've been trying to achieve. So this is what we're building for them. Yeah? So we're building on top of their existing softwares. We're not really touching their existing softwares, but we are taking the decisions out of their existing space. So where we recognize that the decisions are suboptimal, or where we recognize that there's lots of complexity and interconnectedness between the decisions that are operating across their business, we take those decisions out, we apply a piece of AI to them, yeah, and then we drop them back into the existing softwares. So our piece on the smart factory will require the build of a reinforcement learning technique that will take a kind of advanced AI view on production planning. And then at the far end of the process, on the transportation problem, which is quite mature, quite well experienced, we've got a reinforcement learning and optimization technique that will allow that to be optimal and in balance with what's happening in production. All of that is enabled by really close attention to what's happening at the human AI teaming layer. And that's where the digital twin aspect comes in, where we can focus on pushing out metrics on explainability, helping the users interpret how the model has come to the conclusions or the recommendations that it is, and use the digital twin to play out how the scenario will operate and capture some feedback and some learning back into the AI. Okay. And that is it.
Thank you, David. There's nothing worse than seeing a massively passive-aggressive clock counting down at you when you're speaking. So can I introduce, please, Seb for One Spatial next, who's going to be talking about great things happening with digital twins and trusted data, which is most excellent. So please, over to you, Seb.
Thank you, Simon. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Seb Lessware. I'm CTO. Sorry, that's an acronym, Chief Technology Officer at One Spatial. It was really interesting hearing the panel answers, because actually the theme that underpins this is integrity and integration. So that was a great Great piece of insight we got there. I want to also base this on a project that we're working on, the National Underground Asset Register. So I'll use that as a case study. We work with customers in government, utilities, transport, facilities management environments who, whether they know it or not, are working on digital twin type projects, either because their boss has told them, this sounds interesting, do something called digital twins, or they've been doing it for years, and actually, hang on a minute, what we're doing is something called digital twins, that's a nice buzzword, let's use it. So at some point, these customers will have done a search, what is digital twin? Here's an image search, digital twins seem to be blue, I've not done any filtering on that, that's just the images that come up. The key thing that we need to get our customers to understand is, you can't see at the bottom there, but if you read, say, the Wikipedia definition for digital twins, again, I don't want to get into religion here, but one of the main characteristics is the connectivity, because if you read the first paragraph, it says it's a digital representation of the real world. Well, all data is a digital representation of the real world. It's only when you get the live feedback of how it actually is behaving right now that it becomes a digital twin. Now, some of our customers, say we take water utilities, have been doing this for years. Lots of utilities are doing it. They call it SCADA. They have sensors out in their network. So a utility company will have information about their assets. Those points and those lines, and this is from a GIS system, I think this is an Esri image. Those points and those lines represent the assets that they've built. That is not a digital twin, that is a digital birth certificate. That's what they built 15 years ago. The assets that they represent are rusting and cracking and furring up and clogging up and sinking. And it's the sensors on the network that tell them how they're actually performing right now. So if you look at a couple of the layers of data, like a leak noise logger and a pressure sensor, well, that live information is what is turning this into a digital twin. Because if they're going to run analysis on this, say pressure analysis, to say what would happen if we built a load of houses there, is the network going to be able to cope with that extra demand and capacity? Well, if you run it on the data that you built, or the assets you built 15 years ago, that's not going to be representative unless you're using those live sensor feeds to tell you how it's actually performing right now. So for our customers, digital twins, what we work with them is getting the data integrity and the data integration to build that foundation, to make sure that foundation is correct and connected and well-formed in order to make the operational decisions. So the sensors give you the live information, but the underlying foundation data has to be right in order to get your results, your outputs correct. So let's talk about the project that we're working on. So the National Underground Asset Register, this is a project that was kicked off by the UK's Geospatial Commission. And it's happening at the moment, and there's a consortium, so Atkins are the system integrator. We at One Spatial are doing the get the data in, transform it, cleaning it up, and put it in there side of things. And Ordnance Survey are doing the other end, which is presenting web maps to users so that they can see. So the whole point of this project is, if I'm going to dig the road, I want to stop people breaking things or dying. So a lot of problems when people dig up the roads is you don't know what's there, you're going to hit an electricity cable, you're going to break some assets. So let's try and get all of the information from the, in fact, 700 or more different asset owners who care about their stuff that's under the ground, get it in one place in a single model so that people can access it and view it and say, before I dig, what is here? There are, some of these are technology problems, but some of these are also sort of operational and people management problems, because it is not a legal requirement to provide your data into the National Underground Asset Register. All of these asset owners need to be encouraged. So water companies, gas, electricity, fibre, but also things like local authorities who have a tree preservation orders, and trees have roots and roots go underground, or who have light posts and lights have wires that go underground. So there's all these organisations who have data, and they have a really wide spectrum of technology maturity. Some people have a brilliant digital systems, data's ready to be served up. Some people have scanned PDFs from 50 years ago, and you have to deal with the whole spectrum. So, why am I talking about National Underground Asset Register? It is not a digital twins project. However, there are two things that are useful for this project. So one is, when you're doing digital twins projects, you need a good, trusted foundation of data onto which to attach your sensor readings. You need to worry about data integration from different sources, different systems, different organizations. And you need to integrate that data to get some good results, to do some good analysis. So National Underground Asset Register, right now the primary use case is don't break things, don't kill people. But in future that would be a really useful asset, as in a digital data asset, to be able to use for other projects such as digital twin projects. Now, if all we did was take that data in once, centralize it, let it go stale, that will be no use. It needs to be automatically updated periodically as often as possible so that it stays up to date with all the changes from the 700 organizations. So as well as providing a really useful foundation for digital twin projects, there's some really good examples that are common and can be applied to digital twin projects themselves. One important thing is this was a security-first project. So this is critical national infrastructure. You can make all sorts of brilliant insights from this data, including where's the best place to put a bomb to cause the most disruption. So it's still a high-security environment in terms of the data, who can access it. Also, there is competitive elements. So fiber companies all compete with each other. They don't want each other having insights into their competitive data. So there's security sensitivity. The other thing is, because it's not mandatory, we need to lower the barrier to make it as easy as possible for people to contribute their data without it being a pain, another thing we've been asked to do. So what the project approach is, organizations, you give us your data in your structure from your systems. We, as a project, will work out how to transform that into the model and set up an automated process so that next time you upload it, as long as it's the same as the structure as before, it will automatically get ingested. And that was really important to lower the barrier. If we said to people, get your data into this shape, they haven't got time. They haven't got the time or the inclination. So it had to be really easy. It had to be self-served so that when they say, right, 2 months later, we're going to upload our data again, fire and forget, upload it, and as long as it fits within the structure that they've agreed before, and it's the same as the last time, we will accept it in. There are rule checks. There are basic minimum checks to say, hang on a minute, this is fundamental, you can't accept this because there's some missing data. Some rules, like with your MOT, are advisory. So some rules are, it'd be nice if you improved this, but we can still improve it and accept it, okay? So that's the National Underground Asset Register. It's going to be a great project in the future as a resource for the data, and there's some really good lessons learnt for how to do projects like digital twins that need to integrate and make use of high quality trusted data. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you, Seb. So I encourage all of our audience and those online, please go to slido.com, type in the code CDT Summit, choose stream or session 1, and you can ask questions to our speakers, which we'll get to after the final 2 presentations in their slot. So next, I'd like to introduce Kurt, please, from Fujitsu, who's going to be talking about social digital twins. Kurt, over to you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you. I'm here to talk about Social Digital Twin, which is a project that we have a team in the UK that's leading this. It's closely associated with our purpose as Fujitsu, which is to make the world more sustainable by building trust in society through technology and innovation. So when we talk about sustainability, we're talking about things that are leading us as a company towards delivering solutions to major social problems in the world. In this case, decarbonization of transport. Our social digital twin is designed to enable governments and companies to make decisions and policies to solve challenges that are meaningful and get in the way of operational and growth issues. Things like what people will do if you make a change to their transport network that is really great for CO2. We can all decarbonize by stopping driving every day, every car, every van, but it's not good for the economy. So how can we make balanced and sustainable decisions and policies that will work with the people who need to go with them? So we combine our cutting-edge digital technologies with, most importantly, as we've seen a couple of times now, humanity and social sciences, making sure that the solutions that people come up with, people like us who really love technology, work for everybody else on the planet who just has to get from A to B. So we create behavioral models that are based on the decisions people have to make day in, day out. If we want to influence the way people make decisions, we have to influence the sorts of opportunities and services that are available to them. We do that by looking at the real world. And then above the real world, we've got the sensors giving us the data replicated in the digital space, our digital twin world. And then we bring in our social models. And that allows us to look at a reference where we can pre-verify, digitally rehearse, simulate on a grand scale the different types of measures that can make an impact, whether that's knocking 10% off of a bus fare to get more people on the bus and out of their cars, or changing a route of a piece of transport, or putting more e-bikes somewhere instead of non-e-bikes. All of these sorts of measures, the idea is that we rehearse them in the virtual world and look at what people will do if we put them into place. Not what we think is the most optimal and therefore people will decide, but what kind of decisions people will make based on those interventions. So, the key thing that I want to talk about here today is a demonstrator we've got going on the Isle of Wight. We're doing that as a lead technical partner in partnership with the National Digital Twin Program, working with the council, local transport operators, through our research teams. And we're trying to prove out the value of a social digital twin. The Isle of Wight's a great place to do that. It has roads, it has buses, it has bikes, it has people who are going on holiday, it has people who have to go to work, it has a train, it's got ports, everything a country has on a nice small scale that allows you to look at what can we do and how will people react if we actually try to do that. Long before we send people out in high vis with clipboards to count how many people get on the bus, on the train, walk, drive, etc. So the challenge that we're facing in this sort of project is that carbon footprints, when we talk about policy and transport and planning, are reviewed annually, every 2 years, every 5 years. They're not reviewed in the real world impacts of what people do on a day-to-day basis. Can we make an intervention and measure over the next 3 weeks what's happened? Can we actually evidence in quick time the sorts of decisions that we're making and the policies that we're putting in place? So we're working, as I say, with the council and the transport operators on the Isle of Wight to do dynamic rehearsals. So short-term prediction of what's coming up, verify what's happened, and build our model up. And then look at if we put in a verification, put in an intervention for tomorrow when it's going to be sunny. Let's see, today's Thursday. So this time last week, we would have predicted a vast number of people getting off the ferries on the Isle of Wight because there was a big festival on. I don't know if you saw it, it rained. Equally, I don't know if you saw, but there were problems at 2 of the ports on the mainland as people were going out. You can start to see those build-ups of people in population data coming up saying, oh, we've got a lot of devices suddenly in Portsmouth. They should have moved by now, but the ferry's not gone. So you can start to do quick time predictions of, instead of at 1 o'clock, at 3 o'clock, we're going to have a massive transport issue. Our entire model of dealing with that influx of people onto a small space has changed. So what kind of solutions can we propose to allow decision makers to make a decision in near real time, in short order, based on what we predict is going to happen in the next few hours, few days? So the benefit of this activity, the goal is real-time CO2 calculation, real-time prediction, and anomaly detection, and short order. So in the next few hours, next few days, what's coming up next? We can then use that to quantify carbon reduction. The idea is it's in that operational phase. It's not what are we going to do for next 10 years policy. It's what are we going to do now? What are we going to do tomorrow? You can see here, I was going to run a video, but we don't have time for a video, so I took a snapshot this morning of what traffic patterns on the Isle of Wight would have looked like. So this is running our model where we're calculating that 13.65 kilograms per second of CO2 were being produced on the island. The yellow says most of that's traffic. The green says there's a bit of ferry. It was fairly early this morning when I took that. And the red spots is where there are a lot more cars, and it moves down to white and gray. That's the sort of real-time and short-order decision-making tool that we're looking at. With my last minute, I'm going to say, where do we go from here? We're still looking at net zero. It's still critical to us, but it's not the only industry we're working with now. We're trying to move beyond just transport, link that in with the other sectors that influence transport and that are influenced by transport. And so we're looking for partners, always looking for partners. We work with the WBCSD, we work with local operators on the island like Beryl. We work with companies in other projects like Arcadis. We've got collaborations with Alan Turing Institute. More partners is better. It means we can do more things, we can try more interventions, we can access more data. So if you're interested in getting involved with us, there's an email address there you can send, and we can look at how we can collaborate to connect more digital twins, connect more people, connect more data, and to make, therefore, a bigger impact on net zero. Thank you. You're right, the clock's very intimidating.
It is, isn't it? Flashing clock. So to our final speaker in this segment, before we ask all four of them to come back, and we're going to have about 10 minutes of questions, is Christopher, please, from Advanced Infrastructure, who's going to be presenting on digitalising whole system energy planning with local governments, energy networks, and wider stakeholders. Christopher.
Hello, I'm Christopher Jackson, Director at Advanced Infrastructure. We essentially build software tools to help local authorities and network operators, energy network operators, co-create local area energy plans. And essentially a local area energy plan is the order in which we will retrofit and reduce the carbon emissions of the UK building stock, the 25 million buildings in the UK. And essentially the questions that we help our customers solve is which building will I decarbonise first, in which order, using which of a collection of retrofit technologies. Our software tool is of benefit to local authorities because it allows them access to data that they wouldn't otherwise have visibility of on the side of the network operator. And it's of benefit to the network operators because it allows them to triage and prioritize the plans of local authorities and to support those that are most likely to go ahead. But also, very importantly, it gives them visibility of future demand on their networks so they can invest ahead of need. So just describing our problem statement, the government has set net zero goals for 2050 and has set targets across all the major types of low carbon technologies. We already know that we need to deploy around 1.5 million EV charge points within the next 10 years. Similarly, for electrification of heat, around 10 million buildings within the next 10 to 20 years. And a similar number of buildings need to be retrofitted with renewable technology. The problem is that identifying these buildings depends upon understanding what is their form, who are their occupants, and what's their ownership. So you essentially need a digital twin of the UK building stock in order to be able to prioritize and identify where you are going to deploy these technologies. And the other side of the problem is you need to understand the energy network, the gas supply and the power supply to those buildings and the available capacity to import and export energy. So also you need a digital twin of the energy system. So the space we exist in essentially is overlaying those two digital twins in order to improve the decision making around the rollout of retrofit technology on the UK building stock. So this is just a particular case study of one of the tools that we developed, and I'm going to talk around Project Pride, which is an Ofgem Strategic Innovation Fund discovery program that's just recently closed with our partners National Grid Electricity Distribution. What we've been working towards is building a decision-making tool which visualizes, as you can see here, the electricity network and color codes those connection cables, red and green depending upon the ability to connect, and essentially allows the user to select a retrofit technology and drag and drop that onto a given building. And then we use our building stock models to essentially make an intelligent guess of the suitability of that building for that technology and also the availability and cost of a grid's connection. Now, this is a process that usually takes of the order of 30 days and is one of the main reasons of the slow rate of deployment of retrofits on buildings. And it's really important that we improve the quality of the building of the UK building stock data model so we can make these types of decisions even faster than the 30 days and bring that down to the 3 minutes that we're aiming for. So the next learning, or the two major learnings from the Pride project that I want to talk to you about is firstly around where the opportunity lies. And this echoes something I think Marinda said in the morning's session, Marinda from the Open Data Institute, is that there's been lots of research around digital twins, but there hasn't been much research around the intersection of digital twins with humans. And that's essentially what we're trying to draw out with these three circles here. So on the top right-hand side, there have been a number of digital twin projects in the energy space, and two of them are the gas system digital twin and the virtual energy system, which coincidentally will be the subject of the next talk, so do hang around. The next space that's been really explored are organizational problems and organizational, so non-technical barriers to the deployment of retrofits on buildings. With those three projects there, Project Research, Accelerating Net Zero Delivery, and a recent off-gem consultation on the future of local area energy planning. So we know that there's lots of organizational barriers, such as access to funding, skills and capability, stakeholder engagement, which can all be improved through digitalization of workflows. And in the top left, there are analytical tools. So these are tools that sit on top of digital twins like ours, which improve the pace of decision-making, which access connected digital twins across, for example, building stock and the energy system. So the next phase of the Pride project in the coming months will essentially try and sort of overlap these three problem areas and develop digital tools based off connected digital twins that solve organizational problems. And the next sort of learning that I want to share with you guys is this problem of what we call the strategic delivery barrier. So we see this as when a central government target clashes against the ability of a local authority or a local stakeholder to deliver. And it's essentially why we always miss our targets. The key piece of information that a local authority or a building portfolio owner needs to know is which building will I decarbonise when and with what technologies. And that information is never taken into account when strategic targets are set. So in the energy system, we are quite familiar with future energy scenarios and distribution future energy scenarios. This is modelling based upon the aggregation of tens of buildings, hundreds of buildings, and thousands of buildings at a national level in order to try and forecast the number of retrofits and low carbon technologies across transport, sort of the rate of deployment of EV charge points, of heat pumps. And that information is unable to be used by local authorities at the bottom layer because it never retains the building level data upon which that modelling was made. So one of the recommendations that we'll have for the next part of the Pride project is that building resolution is maintained in strategic target setting, such that that information transfer between essentially the central government and the local authority who actually has to deliver those plans are retained. And that was all I wanted to say today. Thanks very much.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So we've got about 10 minutes of questions before our next segment. So if I could invite all four of our speakers back to the stage, please, and we will ask our questions. If we could flip the background to the Slido webpage as well. So we're going to go through and ask the questions in order of which they're most liked. So if you're not on Slido already, go to slido.com, type in this hashtag, CDT Summit, stream number 1, and you can up, like, or thumbs up questions, and we will ask them in order of which they have the most thumbs. So our first question here right at the top, Seb, is from Henry. It says, do you think data providers need to be paid and pass on the cost to the users of a new R, or should it be free at the point of use?
Okay. I don't want to speak on behalf of the Geospatial Commission, but There is a big theme in the project, which is how to make this sustainable. How is it paid for? Obviously, someone somewhere needs to pay for it. Whether whether people would be happy that their utility bills go up, for example, to pay for it is a question. So yes, it is being thought about, but I don't know if the answer has been got to yet.
So watch this space. There's another question, Seb, just for yourself here again. It says, your quote from Wikipedia called digital twins a technology. What is your views? Is it a technology?
No. It's a technique. It's an approach. It requires technology. You could do it with pen and paper, but typically it requires technology. But I would call it a technique or approach.
Very good. Methodology, not technology. Nice. Dan, a question for you, please. How do you know the decisions made are better using your solution? I said Dan. That's not the right person, is it?
Do you mean Dave?
David. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, David.
Okay.
The question said Dan. I read it verbatim. David,
That's
please.
okay, don't worry about it. I was looking down the line waiting for Dan. Can you repeat the question, sorry, because I zoned out at the Dan bit.
So, David, how do you know the decisions made are better with your solution?
Well, I think that is the human autonomy teaming piece. So we're designing that layer to give the user the ability to play around with the recommendation. So if we give a recommendation based on a piece of AI about what we should do, we want the human to be very much part of that decision. So we want them to explore the decision, we want them to play around with it, we want them to try their own decision. And that's where digital twin techniques and thinking comes in, because if they can play that out and see the impact of their decision, and then they can play our decision out and see what the impact is, they're building that trust, they're building that decision making. They may outperform, but if they outperform, then that's where the feedback comes back into what the hat layer is doing to kind of go, well, okay, there's a scenario that I don't know about. So they don't always outperform, but it's all about the human autonomy teaming and trust between each other about how you go ahead and make a decision.
Very good. Seb, another question for yourself, if I could, please. Is there a data standard for NUAR?
There is. So NUAR is based on the MUDI standard, which is from the OGC, the Open Geospatial Consortium, which is a generic data model for storing underground information, and it's based on that.
Very good. Chris, a question for yourself, if you could, please. Interesting presentation. There are lots of things happening in energy. You mentioned it in your presentation, but are you connected to the Virtual Energy System Programme, the Digital Spine, and Open Energy?
Yes. So there are a number of people that run the Virtual Energy System team in the ESO, and we actually correspond to use case number 24 of the Virtual Energy System, which specifically is this challenge of local area energy planning and the coordination between cities, buildings, and the energy system, and essentially the transition and the retrofit at the building level. You mentioned, I think, three. There was the Open Data Institute?
It was Open Energy, Virtual Energy System, and Digital Spine.
Yes, all three.
Very good. I think this next one is also for you, if we could, is how did you validate the digital twin of energy systems at different scales? It seems there are many assumptions made.
Yeah, so a challenge in the energy system on the network operator side is that their digitalization journey is not yet complete, and it is a number of years away until they themselves are certain of where every asset is in the country. So there is always a degree of uncertainty in the data underpinning our decisions. And I think the challenge that the energy system and housing and building stock models have is handling uncertainty, and always attaching an uncertainty measurement to any decision that you make. But the way it's managed is that aggregation is often used because as soon as you get to a certain level of aggregation, essentially the stochastical error in your data set no longer matters. And that's traditionally how it's handled. But we try to go beyond that and still retain a building level metric of its preferred retrofit pathway, which I think is different from other approaches.
Brilliant, thank you. Kurt, we have a question for you, please. Do you think it's possible to sufficiently validate models involving people to enable a true digital twin rather than a modelling approximation?
That's a tough question because I'm not entirely sure true digital twins will get much past modeling approximations to some degree in any space of use. Once you start to aggregate things, and that's where you look at groups of people, aggregated data, rather than trying to make individual models of individual identifiable people in this case. Yes, I think we can have enough accuracy and enough granularity to make and provide informed decisions based on what groups of people will do. Whether we ever get to the stage where we want or need or have exact digital replicas of every single person who's traveling through a space, I think I'll leave that question for another year.
Yes, what is a true digital twin, ultimately? Very good. David, there's a lot of people here calling you Dan. So I'm going to ask the David and the Dan question back to back here. Is the first one, David/Dan, what was your biggest challenge in selling what you do to organizations?
I think actually most organizations do engage with the concept of decision intelligence. I think we find this easier to sell as a company than we did when we were selling, being a data science R&D-led technology company. I think when you spin it and look at the outcome and focus very much on understanding decisions and the impact decisions have on organizations, we've found the majority of the people that we speak to now, they engage with that and they can see exactly where we're coming from, and it's allowing us to move into areas and problem spaces that we weren't able to kind of make a convincing case with previously when we were technology focused. So for us, so far so good. Bearing in mind we've only been rebranded as Decision Intelligence for the past 6 weeks. So.
Brilliant. And that goes on to our next question here is, Dan, this one's addressed. Why is pivoting so important for your business?
I don't think, it's not the thing we set down to do on a regular basis, that's for sure, but we try and understand what the market is doing, and we try and stay a little bit ahead of where our customers are. So the pivots reflect that, we believe the pivots that we've made reflect where we think the customers are enabling us to go and where we can take our customers. So you see the pivot that we made back to being R&D was on the back of a number of years trying to bring data science, AI into decision making in organizations and struggling to get the traction. And what we felt at that time was it was right to focus more in the R&D space to understand how decisions are made and to make sure that AI matures at the rate, at an appropriate rate for it to be effective as a decision-making tool with enough credibility and enough knowledge around how to make it effective. And I think now we've come round to that with the research that we've been doing, particularly on the research side where MOD funding, we can go back in and take this back into industry a lot more effectively than we were in 2017, 2018 times.
Brilliant, thank you. So final 2 questions, one for you, Seb, please first, and then one for you, Kurt. Seb, if asset owners have no obligation to share data on NUAR, is it difficult to assign risk to digging up the road when there still may be cables or pipes there? How do you handle this risk?
So you have to be careful. It's in the asset owner's interests because they don't want their assets dug up because that's expensive and disruptive for them. There is also caution because if people provide information that traditionally they've kept internally, they say, what if someone takes the literal location of this within 10 centimeters and injures themselves? So it all has to be covered with the correct caveats to say this is to give you an indication. It won't tell you the reality within a millimeter. You still have to guess that somewhere in this road there is a pipe. I know that there is a pipe. I'm not going to rely on the exact location because it could be within 30 centimeters. So you have to be really clear on the users, the trust they need to give in the data. But knowing there is a pipe is better than having no idea at all.
Brilliant, thank you, Seb. And our last question here, please, Kurt, for yourself, is what standards are being used to calculate and validate the CO2 calculations? And can you give some examples of what the Isle of Wight Council is currently doing about it?
there are a couple of pieces there. So in terms of standards being used to calculate and validate the CO2 standards, we are deriving our CO2 values off of the UK government's numbers for typical emissions from specific types of vehicles at specific types of speed, so that we're in line with the sort of modeling that's being used in transport across the industry in the UK. So it's possible to compare apples with apples. The other piece of, can we give some examples of what the Isle of Wight Council is doing with this data? No, we cannot. That is their business. But we have a good relationship with them of trying to find use cases that are meaningful to the people on the Isle of Wight. So this is an open research project, so I don't want to go and talk about what the council may or may not be able to do with it in the future.
Very good. Thank you very much. So that's unfortunately all the questions we have time for. So thank you very much to our speakers. Greatly appreciated.